introduce the speakers. I've had the opportunity to see Doug every Thursday, and I'm very, very excited when he talks because number one, he has a tremendous sense of humor. He really like every comment that is made in the meeting, he finds the twist that is pink and it's funny and is light, and I admire that in a person a lot because I'm not that kind very much. I was very excited, especially this is his anniversary month. He's wise. He's a great storyteller. You give him 2 minutes and there's a story that is amazing. And I'm actually very excited to have him with us. He decided tonight to invite Carla, so I can't wait to hear you both. Welcome, Doug and Carla. All yours.
Thanks. My name is Doug Rao. I am a grateful alcoholic.
And hi, my name's Carla Rao, and I'm an alcoholic as well. Let's fix this so we're not staring at ourselves.
Yeah, we're going to put it back on gallery for us. But,
all right. Hi.
Otherwise, we'll just sit there and look at ourselves. So Raquel asked us, I didn't realize that I invited Carla. I thought Raquel invited the two of us. Otherwise, I would have been quiet about it and just talked about myself the whole time. But Raquel asked us to talk about our relationship with God, and we each have
I'll do it.
He keeps going back to speaker anyway. So when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was an atheist. I called myself an atheist, which at the time I didn't mean that. In some writings, Bill said an atheist, it was in the 12 and 12, it says, an atheist is someone who claims proof of the non-existence of God. And I never did that. But to me, atheism meant like amoral or asymmetrical. Asymmetrical means it's not symmetrical. And atheistic to me meant I was not theistic. I had no theism that I subscribed to. I didn't believe in God, but I wasn't a militant atheist. But in my childhood, my grandmother was a Pentecostal minister. She also was a drunk before that. She found Jesus when I was about 5 or 6 years old. So I have no memory of her drinking. I have memories of her friends and my mother's friends talking about when she was drinking. And evidently, she was a pretty bad alcoholic. But as far as I know, she never walked into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I was raised with my grandmother and her twin sister, Daisy and Maisie, being very strong church members in the Pentecostal church. And my mother sent my sisters and I to a Methodist church. As a matter of fact, we lived in Walteria, California, which is part of Torrance. It's in Los Angeles County. And Walteria, there's a church in Walteria, Methodist church, that we attended when I was a child. And there's a meeting there on Friday nights. And one time I was there on a Friday night, and the minister is a woman whose husband was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I told her, I remember that this is the church I attended as a child. And she said, you know when that was? I said, well, I was about 8 years old, so I guess it would have been about 1953. And she had a library of old photograph albums and went through it and found a photograph of my mother and father and an 8-year-old me sitting in the front row of this church. And at the time, the church was in like almost a warehouse, almost a garage, because they were building what became the actual church. And there's a picture somewhere of my dad holding a shovel and standing with a bunch of men holding shovels at the groundbreaking. Anyway, so I have a picture that this minister sent me of my mother and father and I sitting in the Methodist church. So I was raised going to church every Sunday, and actually, when we moved out of Walteria, we moved to Orange County, California, and I started attending a Quaker church, the Friends Church of Garden Grove. And in 1960, when I was in high school, I used to go to the Sunday morning church meetings there, and the evening meetings. They called it Christian Endeavor, CE. And in 1960, I was at the evening young people's meeting, and there was an altar call, and I went to the altar and I accepted Christ as my personal Savior. So through high school, pretty much, I was a Christian. And as a matter of fact, in my sophomore year of high school, I was president of the Bible Club. We had a Bible club that met before school on Wednesday mornings. I think we met at 6 a.m. and school started at 8. And so we had a Bible club from 6 to 7. And I was elected president of the Bible club. Now, what happened was, at some point just before I got out of high school, I had my first drink of alcohol. And because a friend of mine, I really had no interest in alcohol whatsoever, but a friend of mine named Morris was sort of my sex sponsor. And Morris said, if you want to get a home run with this girl, you're going to have to get her drunk. So I heard that, and I went and stole a quart of Rainier Ale. And next time this girl and I went and parked by the railroad track, I pulled out my bottle, and I had a little drink of it. It tasted like carbonated dishwater. I really wasn't interested in, but I handed it to the girl, and she drank some, and we passed it back and forth. And well, one thing led to another, and I got this feeling I had never had before, that all of a sudden I felt like I was handsome and charismatic, witty, and cool. And I knew what cool was, and the only thing I knew about cool was that I wasn't. But after I drank that half a quart of Rainier Ale, I felt like I was so cool that you would see me across the street and go, that guy's cool. That's what alcohol does for me. And it turns out my friend Morris was right. This is the first time I ever had an alcohol buzz, and the first time I ever had sex in front of a witness. So I just made up my mind to do both of these things much as I can the rest of my life. So that was the beginning of my my sex excursion and my alcohol excursion. And I'll get back to that. Now I would like to hear what my wife has to say about it.
Well, I, I'm as far back as I can remember. I felt that I've felt that God thing, if you will. My mother was a Southern Baptist, and her family came from all of that, and I loved the way that she loved God. She'd sing, we'd go to vacation Bible school and all of that, but I don't know when and I loved a lot of it. I really identify with that line in the book where he says, deep down inside every man, woman, and child is that fundamental idea of God. In the last analysis, it's only there that he may be found. He calls it a he. I don't think it's a he, but it, and I felt it and I loved it. But later on, I started experiencing that cognitive dissonance, that happens when you actually go to church and you see that people, my stepfather was one. When my mother married my stepfather, they'd be great in church, and we'd go home, and man, the cruelty, let out the cruelty, let out the, all of the bad stuff. And then, and I had begun to, just try to find my way out. And I remember one time ending up in juvenile hall, and the preacher from my mother's church came. I had stopped going to church, but the preacher from my mother's church came to visit me in juvenile hall. And when he talked about God, I and maybe it's the same for everybody. I feel that ineffable. I feel that spirit. If it's alive, it was alive before Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous has just been a portal through which I came to reconnect, and I'll talk about that later. But just before I ever took a drink, I felt that God thing, but so after the preacher visited me in juvenile hall, I was out on a pass or something, and we were all at the bowling alley, and his son, the preacher's son, invited me out of the bowling alley out to the parking lot to smoke a joint. And so, again, whoops, there's something, one of these things is not like the other. And all of that stuff began to ring truer to me. I had drinks before, and I liked the effect that alcohol produced in me. But I liked this, I like this concept or this notion or this feeling, this experience of this God, this ineffable. My mother had a friend who was practicing seances and a form of Satanism, if you will. I don't even remember what she called it, but I liked that. What I didn't know at the time, and looking back, was that I was looking for a God I could control. I could conjure up and then control, control outcomes and have some idea of, because everything else was so uncontrollable. If God loved me, then you're going to let me have it my way, and who doesn't, when has it not sounded like that? So, I mean, this is a child's point of view, and but when I really got a hold of maybe that's why I loved alcohol so much, was because it gave me that feeling. It felt like it was doing, and if we're going to talk about God, for me, all these years later, from this point of view, for me, body, mind, and spirit is still part of God. How could it not be? When my spirit's not aligned, I'm off emotionally and or mentally and physically. If I'm off physically, I'm off spiritually and emotionally. Even if if I come by it honestly, it still all goes together for me. So, but it took me a long time to calm down about that one and to, to just trust that and know that happens. But anyway, I broke away from that church. And, in that church, we had spiritual awakenings, people that would come and testify. There was one time the driver for the gangster, I don't remember if it was John Dillinger or Al Capone, but he drove for one of those guys, and he came and he talked about his spiritual awakening. He didn't talk about being a drunk. He talked about a spiritual awakening, because every freaking buddy in the world can have one. It's not just alcoholics who are connected to spirit. We all are. And in that way too, I have to say that God is bigger than Alcoholics Anonymous. God gave us Alcoholics Anonymous because we needed Alcoholics Anonymous. Other people find it in other ways. But anyway, I've never stopped looking, although I kind of gave up on ever finding or figuring anything out. In lockup, there was just a lot of wondering, a lot of questioning. And I have to say, all these years later too, I'm still kind of hard on God, because I think God can take it, whatever it is. I think God can take it, the questioning and what the hell is this, and in that I've been able to let go of a lot of old ideas too. Like, I always assumed bad stuff happened to me out on the street because I put myself in that position, or I was a bad girl, and, sexual assault and all of that kind of stuff. There had to be something wrong with me. I had subscribed to all those ideas. I think we can be offered ideas like that in our family, but I subscribed to them then too. I was a bad girl. when we had those cultural notions of like, sex in that summer before junior high. I was playing spin the bottle, and when we were all, me and one of the boys, the bottle landed on me and one of the boys, and we were both doing the same thing as far as I could tell. But when we got back out of that closet where we were in there making out, we came back out, and they called him a player and me a slut, and I subscribed to that, for a long time. I don't anymore. That's another spiritual awakening, but I did for a long time. So those things that would happen to me out in the street and stuff, or even in lockup sometimes, I figured it was just my lot. And, I talk a lot. If you've ever heard my AA talk, and I say that just because I know some of you have, and it's kind of a little bit, old and, repetitive, but I ended up living on top of a mountain. And while, the circumstances were kind of ridiculous, because I should have been able to live in society and have a job and all of those things, but I couldn't. And living on top of that mountain in one way provided me a reentry facility, if you will. We were out there making moonshine and being crazy, but also I had learned how to meditate in the girls' home, and I had been reading, I've always been a seeker. I'd been reading Baba Ram Dass, still trying to figure out what be here now meant exactly, but I had been seeking. I learned to meditate. I'm still doing crank and drinking, but also, trying to see how all of the rest fit in. And mostly, alcohol was just so much quicker than saying a prayer. It just so much quicker than trying to figure out what God's will was, and all of that mess, all of that. So, but I did learn about those, bless you, some of those principles that I began to catch on to, although I couldn't do them very well, or as well as I'd like to, until I got sober. And that was, and I learned this from Baba Ram Dass, chop wood, carry water. What do we do in the meantime while we're growing and going? We get up and we go do what's in front of us, and back then, what choice do we really have? Except to do what's in front of us, but with less intent and less purpose, more confusion. But I got in touch with, my first reconnection like that was one of our friends said, go sit out and connect with the life force of the trees. And, that moves me still, to know that there was the something with a capital S, that something. And it was still a very long time before I would get sober. But that didn't mean there wasn't a God or a need for this ineffable, indescribable, the feeling is infinite power and love that goes beyond, At 5 years sober, I started to say this, at 5 years sober, I was raped by an intruder who came into my kitchen window in the middle of the night into my apartment and raped me and robbed me. Like, what the hell is that? What kind of a God is that where you get sober? So like, I didn't want to drink, but the question was, oh, okay, am I supposed to accept that a girl like me is just going to have stuff like that happen to me from time to time because I can handle it? That was the idea. And then I had people who were sober and walking a spiritual walk, even though it wasn't necessarily my same one. It probably had 500 different names for it, but they said, nope, you just got in the way of someone who wasn't looking to do good that night. You just got in the way, just like other people got in your way. And I began to have, for me, my God is very pedestrian, is very, in blue jeans and tennis shoes. Like I said, I don't hold back from this power because there's no place to hide, and it can't hide from me either. But I have come to trust the journey more. I'm gonna let Doug talk in about 2 minutes. But I've come to trust this journey more, and to accept and love the fact that for me, spiritual growth is messy. It's got a lot of faces. It's messy, and it cries and it laughs and it jumps and it hugs and it pushes away and is scared, and it opens up, and it trusts, and it doesn't trust. And that's because there's not been any part of this journey that didn't belong to getting me to here now. And so I still can't define or comprehend this power that we call God. And I'm okay with calling it God, except that all these years later, I feel more of an if atheist would mean not that there's not a God, but that there's no one thing we can pin that on. If God is absolutely everything, then there's no deity, there's no one thing running the whole show, although everything is perfectly in place. So for me, that's a little bit kind of like atheism in a way. So I still don't, the beauty, the thing I loved in the chapter to the agnostics is that it said, though we could never fully define or comprehend that power, and we don't have to ever, and any idea, any concept, however inadequate, is enough to make a start. And then we just start and continue from there. Anyway, so now I don't know any more about how to define or comprehend God, but I trust the process a whole lot more, if that makes sense. It's up to you.
Thanks. So when we last left Doug's story, well, there's something saying, anyway, signs keep popping up on the screen. So I was about to graduate high school, and I just had my first drink and my first sex, and I made a commitment to just do both of those things much as I could. And so that was in 1963. By 1965, I had grown my hair long and grew a beard. I was playing music. I was playing music for a living, and although I was living in my parents' house, but most of the time, off and on. But and having sex as much as I could, and drinking and getting into other drugs. Somebody said, "Here, try this." Okay, and so one time, because that's what the musicians were doing in the late '60s, and we were just experimenting with a lot of drugs, and hell no, we won't go, and all that, and I was on a trip on LSD with some friends, and we were out in nature, and just having a great experience with nature, with a stream, with the plants on the side of a hill where there were no homes around, and just grinning so much that it actually hurt. And all of a sudden, I had this, you could call it a spiritual experience, I suppose, but all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute. All this stuff, this God, good, love, life, it's all chemical. I took this chemical, and now I'm attuned to nature. I'm in tune with nature because of a chemical reaction, and I'm loving it, and I'm connected to Mother Earth, to the stars, to science, to maybe every religion, I don't know, but I was just felt open, and it was chemical, and everything that we think of God is chemical. Those poor bastards in all those churches and all those synagogues and all those temples, they don't even know. They're just trusting this chemical thing and calling it something else. So now I got my new religion is chemistry and music, and it opened me up actually to a new musical experience. It actually did open my mind to a new, it was a spiritual awakening, and it was chemical. But then there were times when I felt close to God, whatever that is, one time, oh, I got a job working in this famous musical called Hair, and went in Las Vegas, and then we went on the road. And we became the first national tour of Hair, and we toured for 3.5 years doing this show about hair. And that wasn't about hair; it was called Hair. It was about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it was good because we would get to a town and we would perform our singing and dancing, and people would offer us sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it was a good job, really. Um, and At one point in St. Louis, I took a lot of different drugs, mescaline and cocaine and some kind of animal tranquilizer, and smoking some marijuana, and had this spiritual experience that all of a sudden I thought, oh, wait a minute. Maybe my whole life experience is some kind of test, and everybody knows about it except me, including all my friends that I did the show with, my family, everybody I've ever known has known that this was a test that God set up to between me and God. And I had to figure it out, and I started asking my friends, so do we still have to do the show? They would go, yeah, we have to do the show. Okay, all right, we have to do the show. And that's part of the test of God. No, it's not part of the test. It's your fucking job, man. And so but that went away after. It took me about 3 or 4 days before I realized, well, that was just a chemical reaction too. But anyway, I'm going to say, cut to the quick. My drinking and using slowly got out of hand. At that point, I don't think it was out of hand because I could still do the show. Uh, I hooked up with a girl in the show, and she got pregnant, and we had a little girl, and came back to L.A. and I thought I was a good father because while my wife was out working Kelly girl office temp work, I made a car seat for my Harley and hauled my little girl around while I was doing auditions and sitting in bars drinking and visiting friends and cheating on her mother. And I thought, what a good parent I am, taking care of my kid all day. And I was driving around with my kid in a diaper on the back of a Harley in LA traffic. That's how good a parent I was. But finally, her mother said, "You got to go. I can't do this anymore. I want you to stay in." My daughter's name was Starshine because she was born on the road with the hair show, and that was a song from the show. And so she said, "I want you to stay in Starshine's life, but just get out of mine. I can't do this anymore." So I did, and I ended up getting a job as a stagehand for TV shows. I was a prop man mostly on TV shows and joined the Stagehands Union, and I became a cocaine dealer on a famous soap opera, and that was a very cool job because I had people. I lived about 3 or 4 miles from the studio where we did the soap opera, and people would come to and you'd work 10, 12 hours in the show, and then people would come over to my house to buy cocaine, and I'm lucky that didn't ever get shot or get busted or anything. I never did any time in jail, but I finally decided I can't. My cocaine use was getting out of hands. My habit was about 3 grams a day, and my giveaway habit was probably 2 or 3 grams a day, and I needed to stop selling, which means I needed to stop using. So I went to CA, Cocaine Anonymous, and I thought about quitting drinking, but I thought, I'm just going to give up drugs and just keep drinking like God intended. And but my drinking just got out of hand, and I got hurt a lot. I skied off a cliff and broke my shoulder and was out of work for 6 weeks, and I just got back to work, and I fell off a 4-story parking lot and broke my pelvis in 2 places and broke my foot, blew up my foot. And it took me uh, 5 months before I could walk again, and my drinking was so out of hand. And a friend of mine started going to AA, a couple of friends of mine. So I watched them, and I finally decided I was going to go to AA, not to quit drinking, but just to cut down, so I could not be an alcoholic anymore, and I could just have a beer on a hot day, or have a little sake with my sushi, or a little red wine with my steak, you know what I'm saying? Or sometimes chug down a fifth of whiskey and and get in trouble, but not all the time. So I started going to AA, and for 8 months I drank every day. I did not believe in God. Everybody was talking about God, and I'd say to people, and my attitude at that time was that you asked me about God. What do you think about God? I'd say, you know what? For every man that's been murdered in the streets for his purse, there have been 10,000 murdered in the name of God. And people would say, yeah, kid coming back, and okay, what about your loving God? What about the children who were starving to death in Biafra? How about the people who were being murdered in the streets? Good people who have been robbed and murdered, and what about that? What about my sister who has cancer, and she belongs to a church, and I'm just a drug addict, and I don't get cancer. And this guy said to me, so you don't believe in God, because if God was so great, why can't he do things God's way? Oh, shut up. And what happened to me, I got a big book at my first meeting, and I started looking through it. And the only thing I wanted to read was this chapter called We Agnostics, because I thought that was going to be how the smart people got sober without God. And of course it isn't. I read the whole chapter, but there's 3 pages into that chapter, on page 46, there's a sentence towards the middle of the page that says, "We found that God does not make too hard terms on those who seek him." And I had never heard anybody in any of the religions I thought I knew about say anything like that. My grandmother's Pentecostal church, it seemed to me, said just the opposite. They would say, I don't know if you've ever been to a Pentecostal church, but they get loud, and they would say to me, this is, Doug, they call me Doug. I got a one-syllable name. They couldn't quite get through the whole syllable, Doug, we are very sure that God makes hard times on those who seek him. Boy, God will not even hear your prayers unless you're baptized. And I don't mean sprinkled on the forehead like some Methodist. I'm talking about total submersion. That's why we got a tank of water for Christ up here. Come on up, son. We're going to soak you down, pull you up, washed in the blood of the Lamb. Somebody get this boy a towel. And I'm like, I'm 14 years old. I'm like, save your towel. I am not getting wet in this room tonight. Because I don't know if my grandma told him I touched myself or what. But I'm not taking any chances. They could be sending my ass to Jesus for my own good. So I'm like, yeah, I'll be right. I have a brand new Levi's on, shrink to fit. See, so I don't want them to shrink up. I won't be able to ride my bike home. So I'll be back later. I'm out of there, man. I'm just out of there altogether. But now I'm reading this book. It wasn't just the Pentecostals either. My girlfriend was a Catholic. She had to go to confession, communion, confirmation, bunch of other confessions, bunch of other cons to see how many Hail Marys and Our Fathers would save her ass from purgatory or whatever. I don't know. My friend Michael was an Orthodox Jew. He couldn't eat a BLT with bacon in it. He'd ordered BLT, hold the bacon. Oh my God, Michael, you just ordered a salad on toast. And then there were Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims. And I thought, okay, I'm done, But AA is telling me in this book that everybody said was the only text, we found that God does not make too hard terms on those who seek him. So I went back to AA, and I told you, for my first 5 months in AA, I didn't pray. I didn't have a home group or sponsor anything. I was drinking every day. I was taking bogus chips. Uh, I, was, I had like 30 days at one meeting and 90 days at some other meeting. And, you know, I had 4 different sobriety dates in 4 different groups. But what happened to me is one night I came home from a meeting and I had a bottle of whiskey that I bought on the way home from the meeting. I never drank at meetings. And I laid on the floor and drank whiskey and watched TV until I passed out. And I woke up about 3 a.m. and I got my bottle and I crawled on my hands and knees through the living room, through the hallway, the bedroom to go to sleep. And I stood up to get undressed and I fell on my knees. I spilled whiskey all over the bed. And I picked up the bottle. There was still some left. And I'm sucking the whiskey out of this bedspread. And a voice in my head said, "Hey, man, that ain't right." Like, I swear it was audible. I could hear this voice saying, "That ain't right. You thirsty? There's whiskey in the bottle." I said, "I'm not thirsty. I'm frugal. I'm, I'm frugal. I'm not going to let whiskey evaporate in the bedspread overnight." And I looked at what I was doing. And maybe I'm one of those guys. I've been going to AA for 5 months. Maybe I'm one of those guys that can't get this thing. I can't believe that because I'm smart. I know I'm smart. And I've heard people say you can't be too dumb to get this thing, but you can be too smart. I hadn't heard that at that time. But I did a dumb thing then. I said, "God, if you're there, please help me." And over the next couple of weeks, I had got people from AA would be between me and a drink. I'd be in a liquor store and somebody from AA is behind the counter. My neighborhood liquor store. And I couldn't get away. "What are you doing in here?" He said, "What are you doing in here?" "I just came to get some smokes, you know. I'm in the Vaughn's Market at the liquor department. Somebody from AA is pushing a cart towards me. I'm at a restaurant, start to order a drink. Somebody from AA is the waitress, you know." I'm like, eventually, I came to believe that I had been on my knees asking for help, and I got the help. God put all these AA people between me and a drink, which didn't keep me from drinking, but you can't ignore it after a while. And I was on the way to work, and I realized this, and I pulled the car over to the side of the road. I said, "Okay, God, you and me." It was my second step. I didn't know that at the time. It took me a while to realize it. But it's the moment that I came to believe, okay, I'm going to give this belief thing a shot. And that was the beginning of my new relationship with the Creator. You want another term?
Yeah. um, but I don't know how you say that any quicker anyway. But I was thinking about psychedelics. I did my share of those, and what I found was that uh, uh, and I think there's kind of an uprising. People are finding out benefits of psychedelics now, and they're exploring all of that now. And I'm not going to talk for or against it, but I know that before I got sober, I had tried them, and they brought, gave me great realizations and some that stuck with me. But what I eventually came to the conclusion that all of that was going to have to happen manually, if you will. That where it brought me was a real place, but it was going to have to be done in a real way. And the same thing happened when I got sober. I had an idea and a memory and an experience of this power we call God, but I couldn't experience it to the fullest until I got sober, and I woke and I got to wake up to that. But even holding God's hand and coming to work 12 golden steps, the obsession to drink alcohol wasn't lifted for me right away. Not till not till I was about 9 months sober, and in the middle of making amends. For me, Alcoholics Anonymous provided this manual ladder, if you will, or this process that I could, that this visceral thing that I could do. Maybe it was focus, because I was out there. I remember sitting on top of the mountain, and we had nothing. We had a plastic tarp for a roof, and it was winter was coming, and I thought, I need some shoes. I don't have shoes. And I went down to the box behind the store in town, and there was this pair of boots, in the box. And I got this, so for me, that spirit, this synchronicity, all of that stuff happened before I got sober, but I couldn't experience it to the fullest. And I couldn't quite, there was something in me, life force, if you will. If God is anything, it's this life force. I don't believe that alcoholics' normal state is drunk. I don't believe that. I believe that our normal state is this life force in us that nudges us forward. And when we don't, there was a lot I didn't know how to do, and alcohol certainly made me feel like it was working for me, whatever that means. Nobody else ever said it was working for her. But, it felt like it worked for me until it was obvious it didn't. And then crossing that threshold it required an amount of faith, and maybe just being done, like Ralph calls it, a well-whooped ass, having a well-whooped ass and nothing left to do but pick up this kit of spiritual tools. And, all these years later, and I love that line too, that Doug talks about, we know that God doesn't make too hard terms on those who seek him. And one of those things that made me kind of fall in love with him when I heard him share for the first time. I thought, me too. But so when it came time to knowing that the alcohol had to go. For me, it was clear. Some people say it's not a drinking problem. Well, honey, when I got here, I had a drinking problem, and it had to be, until anything else could be helped, that had to be removed, because there was nothing else. I couldn't do anything else. So my first sponsor said, why don't you start by counting the coincidences that happened in your life, those situations that seem to fall together for the good of everyone without you having your hands on it. Coincidence. And already, that's why I told the boot story. I got that. I know that. I know that kind of stuff happens, and not just for me, because how could, when we're, God isn't, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So I started with the coincidence thing, and the first coincidence I could count was that I had been living next door to this woman who had 5 years of sobriety all along this whole last year that I had been living, my husband and I and my daughter, in this tiny little apartment. And this woman had been living there the whole time. And when we had our big blow up on Saturday afternoon with the cops and the gun and the neighbors and all of that stuff one more time, with me and my husband, after that, she came over and she 12-stepped me. He left, the cops left, everybody left. And then a couple days later, she came over and knocked on my door, and she had the big book and the 12 and 12 in her hand. And, I just realized over time how brave it really was that she knocked on my door, that she didn't know what she was going to find on the other side of that door. And she knocked anyway. And she asked if she could come in and talk to me. And for me, that was a big coincidence, and I don't, and what allowed me to open that door, and when she said, can I talk to you, for me to say yes, something inside me was happening to meet that. So I don't think that God shows up anymore. I don't think we conjure God up. I think we wake up to what always been available. And it has taken time to recognize that. And a lot of saying things like, well, God must have been with me that night, oh, he wasn't with the other guy who got hurt. Apparently he didn't like him as much as he liked you. So, whoops, nope, not as a good idea, not good enough. So out, that idea goes. And most of my getting to experience this power greater than myself is about the nope, not that, and nope, not that. And but it was okay because even in the questioning got me to the next moment. So so it all belongs, if you will, anyway. So it started with that, and my basic practice began with that little outline on pages 83 to 88, and I don't skip over the 10th step. I don't skip over pages 83 to 85 because there's, all of that is the same steps we come to do long form to get to trust the process. And then we just continue to do that in step 10 and then step 11. Man, I do that. I've always done the outline in the book, but then it says go out and there are books and temples and places and visit and see. And everywhere I go, I find that I see the similarity. We didn't, it's like, I am going to say this. I have a little bugaboo about, when people say, oh, that sounds just like AA. No, we sound just like them. They got here first. They've known this a long time. Bill and Bob said this is a synthesis of principles that have been passed down through the ages. And I had to get sober in order to grasp them and then continue to practice them. I can't do it. I can't do this without being sober. A lot of other people can, and they are just fine. They don't have a second class spiritual experience. It's not, it's just as good as our, but I needed this particular one. I needed this particular portal. I needed the portal of Alcoholics Anonymous to bring me to it so that then, guess what? Doesn't leave me in AA, tethered to AA, it shoots me back out into the world to go be some kind of demonstration. Some days a great example, other days a horrible warning of what a spiritual experience looks like. And, some days I am conscious and in every moment and can be kind or at least patient or at least closed-mouthed or, restraint of tongue and pen. And other days I'm very generous for whatever reason it's pouring out of me. And other days, man, I just maybe not fit for public consumption. And I don't think there's anything about that that's not spiritual, because for me, that means I'm not running away from any of it. And I used to shut it all down, and now I get to be in it. And so I like to say I've had a spiritual awakening sufficient to bring about a human experience. And I know that that's kind of a one-off from when we, that's old saying of we're not, human beings having a spirit, whatever, we're, whatever that is.
Spiritual beings.
But I didn't know how to live in this world. I didn't know I'm okay with the infinite and all of that, whatever, the big mystery, that's wonderful. And I get to feel it now. I get to be present in it. And meditation, the practice of meditation. And there's not just one way to do it either. And Doug reminded me the other day, and I love this story. This is one of my favorite stories in the world, because we can get really married to her. And I know I can, and I've heard some of you guys talk about it too. I can get married to something that works. So don't miss this. Do it like this, but just because we're excited and it seems to work. And then of course that crumbles and a new way has to come. It has to, it has to. That's life force. Life's longing for itself. It's nudging me forward. However, we can get married to certain things, and we've seen it that, this kind of prayer is he not doing this kind of prayer? Because if he's not, that might be your trouble, and like, okay, we'll try it, but okay. The story. So anyway, there's a great story about that. There's a wonderful book written by, first he was a friend of AA, and then he turned out to be one of us. And his name's Ernest Kurtz. And then his friend Catherine Ketchum wrote this book called Spirituality of Imperfection. And it's just a collection of allegories and stories about, from all kinds of traditions and practices. And it's a very friendly and comforting book to me because it has no agenda. In fact, the agenda is to loosen our grip on the agenda, And so there's this story, and forgive me if I'm going to try not to butcher it. But this bishop was on a ship. He was passing this this primitive island, and he said, I think I'd like to go in and spend the day on the island with everybody and find out how they're all doing. And so he walked among the people, and he met these three men, and the three guys were very excited to meet the bishop, and they said, Bishop, so good to meet you. We Christians. And the bishop said, oh, really? And he said, well, tell me, how do you pray? And the three guys said, oh, we say, we are three, you are three, have mercy on us. And the bishop was like, what in the hell is this? So he says, no, I'm going to spend this whole day teaching you to do the Lord's Prayer. So he spends a day and he gets it as good as he can. They're reciting the Lord's Prayer and they're all happy. So he leaves. And a couple years later, the bishop's ship is going past this island. And he says, I think he looks over there and he's remembering, what a wonderful blessing he bestowed upon them, teaching them the right way to pray and everything. And then all of a sudden he looks across the water and he sees these three lights. And they're the three lights are getting closer and closer to the ship. And the bishop's like, what is this? And finally, they get close enough where he can see, that's these three guys. That's those three guys. And the three guys are coming up to the ship and they get him on board and they say, oh, Bishop, please, we forgot your beautiful prayer. We say, our Father in heaven, and then we forget, please. And the bishop said, hell. Just you keep saying, we are three, you are three, have mercy on us. So it's not the way I pray.
But you forgot to say they walked across the water.
Well, I think it was clear. Was it not clear that they walked across the water? I'm sorry. They walked across the water to get to the ship. That's why the lights kept getting closer to the ship. Okay, sorry about that. You missed. No, I knew I screwed up somewhere. But so they walked across, and then so the bishop said, "Sheesh, you just keep saying your prayer, right?" And so it just goes to show that it's what's in my heart. It's what's in our heart that so I don't have to be easy on God. I don't have to tiptoe around. We're all here at the same time and walking in the light. I don't want to hide. I don't want to hide anymore. And if I can't ask a question, then I know there's something more wrong with that than there is that the question came up in the first place. So anyway, now I'm in love with the journey. I'm in love with the journey. Even though it brings me to some painful places and some painful awakenings, it takes me away from people I thought I would be with forever. It takes me, not because they're wrong and I'm right or any of that stuff, but it takes, if I'm following the journey that I'm supposed to be on, sometimes it is, it's different than what I hear the party line saying. And so I don't go alone. I have a sponsor. I have good friends that I talk to about this, but it can bring me, a spiritual awakening can bring us to some places that are kind of frightening anyway. So there's that. You have something else?
Yeah, I'll just say, when I used to try to pray in the morning on my way to work, and I would get pissed off at traffic, have to put God on hold, and I got irritated with that. So somebody suggested, why don't you pray before you do anything else? So for more than 35 years, when I wake up in the morning, before I do anything, come out of bed on my knees, and out of the 11th step, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. That's what I do. I say, good morning, Father. Thank you for another day. Thank you for all the blessings in my life, those I see and those I don't see. Help me to see your will for me today and give me the power to carry it out. And then I get up and go screw something up.
And that's the other thing, is that he's a knee prayer and I'm not. Okay.
And she's a meditator and I'm not.
And I used to love what Howard Polens, who's no longer here with us here, but he used to say, wherever you see God pass, mark that spot and go sit in that window again, because we all have different windows. I mean, for me, I found it surfing and rollerblading and as well as, I always have a general practice that I do and that, but then, there's wherever it takes you, whatever makes your heart sing or charms your heart. Some people write, some people read, some people, you know, uh, ski or golf. I know a bunch of guys that get together and they go golfing. And if you don't, and the way they talk to each other and share, they lift each other up. How is that not? How is that not like a group prayer? So, and then they'll turn around and say, you're not doing it right, but whatever. but but I really believe that. Why not? Why would that not be so
So yeah, so Raquel asked us to leave some time for questions and answers. So that's where we are now.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm going to start with the questions because there was two. First of all, what I am happy and my heart really feels movement that we're here talking about this process, about this. I love the word that you use, ineffable. I had to look it up because it was beautiful. I cannot explain to it. I don't have the conception. I don't have the understanding. But it was so beautiful to hear two points of views of that journey. And I want to say that particularly, Carla, I haven't heard you speak too much. And I love how practical all of this is for you. And at the end of the day, at least for me right now, it made me super hopeful, really, really super hopeful into saying like, how can I wake up to what is? And it's so funny how, and I want to ask you about both of you about this journey on how it becomes more tangible for you, little by slowly. How do you know how to return to those windows that you were talking about? And more than anything, you mentioned, Carla, that, okay, this is a good idea, but it's not good enough
mhm.
out, right? That allows you to expand that experience with the nameless one. So would you like to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. And through seeking, through continuous, deep dives into different areas. And I mean, I'm going to name some things. I don't like to recommend any one thing, but I have taken a few journeys. For me, basically, first hearing a Sermon on the Mount, Emmett Fox was very practical in dismantling some very old ideas about the cruelty of God and a cruelty of our old ideas about God. But then uh, A Course in Miracles for me was very instrumental in dismantling some old ideas, and basically, the thing for me is anything that does not bring me not indulgence but peace. If I'm looking for approval from somebody, or if I'm looking to be a part of something that doesn't seem to want me to be a part of it, and I don't know why, um, letting go. It helps me to let go of something so that it can either be revealed or I can find where I am supposed to be. Sometimes I'm not supposed to be where I think I am, and letting go of that notion. So the Course in Miracles was instrumental in my learning how to uh, focus on this internal, what is the peace. And then later on, somebody that helped me a great deal with meditation practice is a woman named Pema Chodron, and she literally wrote a book called Start Where You Are. And it was about a couple different methods of meditation that I liked a lot, mindsets that I still use, even though I wouldn't consider myself a Buddhist, even though I took a deep dive a few years with that practice. I didn't leave out any others either. So Am I answering this question? So by following up on this and trying these new things and or trying the less chaotic ideas, what am I, and then of course, in step 6 and 7 for me, Bill Wilson talks about, and incidentally wrote that essay on step 6 and 7 on, at the same time he wrote that letter on emotional sobriety. And when he talks about faulty dependencies and all of my defects of character, if you will, or my bad behaviors, are charged by fear. They're activated by fear of not getting or fear of losing. Those two things. And by looking at that, what am I afraid of? Not getting or losing. That simplifies it for me. At any time of the day, what am I afraid of? And then I can stop it. I don't have to keep moving in that direction. Is it something spiritual, mental, physical, material that I'm afraid of losing or not getting? So in that process, what am I afraid of? And stop that pursuit. In a moment, it helps to begin that.
Mm.
Oh,
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you, Carla. Ralph, you have a question or a comment?
My name is Ralph White. I'm an alcoholic.
All right.
And I want to thank the two of you. Oh, this was a great, great, great meeting. So much wisdom, and it was contained in such a user-friendly presentation. Doug, God doesn't make hard terms. And Carla, God in blue jeans, and I just like the way both of you, sometimes people make spiritual experience seem like it's out there. You two made it really, really accessible, practical. That being said, two questions. One, because I know you both, everybody does not. So, and not so much important for the bona fides, but super important for, wait a minute, what does this journey look like? So could both of you, which you didn't do, both tell how long you've been on this journey? That's one. And two, as a couple, this God idea, has there been anything in the relationship, beginning, in, middle, over time, where that has caused some friction or collision, or conversely, anything where that has been like your safe place? The fact you both have this spiritual connection.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. Well, there's a couple.
sobriety date.
Huh?
Sobriety date.
Oh, sobriety date. Yeah, my sobriety date is June 7th, 1987. So I just turned 38 years sober. Poor Carla's only 37. And there's two incidents. I'll go through them as quick as I can. Once, Carla and I started a speaker meeting on Monday nights in a park near us years ago, and it went for about 4 years. And then people started to get uninterested in it, and there were problems anyway. But the worst fight that we've ever had, and I'm talking about a screaming fight, standing on each side of the bed screaming at each other, was over which prayer we should close our meeting with. I swear to God that's true. It's funny, but at the time it was not funny. Somebody might have got hurt. But another time, Carla was working at Home Depot, and she had an idea. She wanted to study to be a massage therapist. And we said, well, we don't know what to do. And we stood before I went to my morning meeting and she went to work. And we held hands and we said, God, if this is what we're supposed to do, please make it clear and give us all the help we can get. And it was like, I think $1,700 or something like that for the class.
17,000.
Oh, 17,000. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. And we didn't have it, but we owned property. I mean, we could get it, but we needed to know. We were supposed to. So when I went to my meeting and I told this guy that I sponsored what I was dealing, he goes, "I'll loan you the money, interest free." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I can do it. I'll loan you the money, interest free." And the same day, Carla stopped on the way home from work. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just had to ask all the questions, and all, I can't remember all of the details, but both of us came home, and I said, I think it feels right to do it. And I can't remember the circumstance that gave the green light on my side of it, but when I got home, he said, "Well, let me tell you what happened at the meeting today. You know, this guy offered to loan him the money, and we didn't borrow the money from him, but it gave us the green light to go ahead and we got a loan for the money and went ahead with it. And I started a little business, another business, from that. I and had a little business until COVID shut it down for I was in it for about 6 years, and then COVID came, and I did something else, which was it was kind of a part. I'm not kind of. It was part of the journey. I mean, from the beginning, in getting the stupid jobs that we're supposed to get, and then rising in that, and then I came to a point where I was willing to go to any lengths to get out of that industry. I didn't believe in it anymore. I didn't want to be a part of it, and I didn't know how to fix it either. And so it had been good. I'm not sorry I was there, but it was time. And taking that leap and then ending up in these jobs, I really got scared. I didn't know. And that's why I say, sometimes a spiritual journey, spiritual development, can be really kind of messy. I mean, I was driving a limo. I was working at a dance studio. I even tried to sell that stupid insurance that they send you the emails to teach you how to sell insurance, and then worked at Home Depot for a while. And by the time I got to Home Depot, I wanted to go live in a cave, I mean, I was ready. So much stuff, so many questions. And then, so I started saying Home Depot is my monastery. And then out of that developed this thing in me that it was something that I'd always loved doing. But then now I thought maybe this can be something that puts me closer, this healing energy, this way, and I always like to joke, I went legit because of, past, but it was a whole new adventure. And so we got to take that together. And yes, I think that we are each other's mirrors and our teachers and our sandpaper. When you live with somebody, you better have a facility for being honest with yourself. I have to, and in that, I think we've kind of worn each other down in some things. We're not so sensitive. We don't take each other the wrong way. We are getting hard of hearing in our older age. So we say, ha, what, ha, a lot, there's that. But then when things change, we have become in tune with each other so that when things changed, and I'm going to talk about this because it scared me when it happened. It seemed sudden in a way. And that was when his COPD kicked up to an exponential point after his car caught on fire and all this stuff, and he began to change, and I knew it wasn't him. And when you know and love somebody and you watch that happen, my first thought was, it's time for me to go. He doesn't want me here anymore. And then I walked the dog. I said, you learn, walk the dog, and then come back, and then when I got back, I thought, that isn't what's going on. What else is going on? And then he came out and he said, I made an appointment with the doctor. Will you go with me? So both of us are having to do this, and we better have a facility for being honest with ourselves if we're going to work together.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what happened with Carla came home from Home Depot, and she stopped. She thought she had missed the class to become a massage therapist. So she stopped at the place to find out when the next time was going to be available. And they said, oh, we're going to start one next week. So she had an opportunity to start the class next week. I had a friend, Musponsi, that said he'd loan me the money, which I didn't. I'm glad that Carla pointed out I didn't borrow from him. We borrowed against our home, and she made that money back and everything. It was a good thing to do. Except it got through COVID at us.
So we took it as a green light.
That's good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we close, guys?
I just have one more thing to say, and that one more, and that is, what appealed to me about Alcoholics Anonymous though so much is, and maybe just that's where I learned it, but that spiritual awakening is available to everybody. We don't have to know anybody special or be anybody special. Don't have to, it's not a name dropping thing. It's if we do this, if we do the searching, if we do the work, each of us gets it. Because I'm a terrible spectator, and if I had to just sit around and watch other people get it, I'd have been gone a long time ago. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Doug, would you like to say anything else before we close?
Oh, well, I'll say this. If I told you what I do when I wake up in the morning, and I say that prayer 3-4 times a day, usually, depending on the situation, about as often as I tell my wife I love her. And if somebody came to me that I trusted and showed me undeniable proof that there was no God, I'd still wake up the same way because it's been working for me for a long time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to say a closing statement and then open the mic for everybody to thank you.